So, good morning to all of you. In the last class, we have tried to understand about the evidences which are in support of evolution. We have discussed a lot about the homologous organs, analogous organ, embryological evidence, paleontological evidence, physiological evidence, all those things. So now we should move on to the very next chapter, which is very important in understanding the process of organic evolution. All of you know that Darwin has proposed, for the first time, he has tried to help us in understanding the process of evolution by proposing a well known theory that is known as Darwin Wallace concept or the theory of natural selection. But when Darwin has proposed, he went wrong in many ways. That also we have discussed. So that's why now it is for us to know uh, how actually this process of evolution must have taken place. What are the key factors which are helping the evolution or which are uh, responsible for the continuity of this evolutionary process. So that we have to study under one heading, what is known as the synthetic theory of evolution. This is popularly known as neo-Darwinism also. That means in the very beginning, I would like to make it clear, the synthetic theory of evolution, though it gives lot of inputs to understand the process of natural selection or Darwin's Wallace concept, it is not against what the Darwin has suggested. It has also incorporated this Darwin Wallace concept and the modern development in the field of biotechnology, become genetics, chemistry, biochemistry, all those things are incorporated in this. And using this, a new theory has been proposed, and that theory we call it as synthetic theory of evolution, which is popularly known as neo-Darwinism. Neo means new inputs to the Darwinism. Here, the synthetic theory of evolution or neo-Darwinism is not discarding the theory of natural selection. It also includes the natural selection because uh, the role of natural selection in bringing the process of evolution is uh, undoubtedly accepted by all the scientists. So that's why now we will try to understand this synthetic theory of evolution or neo-Darwinism one by one, because here there are a lot of inputs, as I have told you, that has come from different branches of biology and other allied sciences also. So here, especially this modern synthesis or neo-Darwinism, it started in 1930s and 40s when the population genetics gained importance and it is linked with the natural selection. So this major changes what you expect here is the neo-Darwinism believes that all evolution is microevolution. Even microevolution, gradual change adds up over hundreds of generations, and as a cumulative change, new anatomical feature, new species, new fundamental body plans appear. This is uh, what we call the neo in the earlier stages of neo-Darwinist has proposed, and this is known as microevolution. Evolution is a very slow process. It will take thousands of years or hundreds of generations to produce a new change. But in the beginning of 1970s, instead of microevolution, the macroevolution became popular and it challenged to this uh, early concepts of this neo-Darwinism. According to this macroevolution, uh, the large scale evolutionary changes do not occur as a gradual or stepwise process, but instead of that, all of a sudden, abruptly it happens. So, this is the difference between microevolution and macroevolution. Macroevolution always advocates slow and steady gradual changes over hundreds or thousands of generations. But whereas macroevolution says that uh, large scale evolutionary changes, if it has to happen, it should happen or it will happen uh, abruptly. So that's why, then apart from that, macroevolution, it involves phylogenetic evolutionary trends, where trends above the species level. Most of the time, we limit our evolution to the origin of new species or speciation. But this macroevolution says not only the species, even at the higher taxa can also show the evolution. This is what uh, the major difference between microevolution and macroevolution. The textbook authors consider microevolution is a mean, gradual, generation upon generation change. And the macroevolution means abrupt saltatory changes or saltational changes, potentially resulting in the new anatomical feature, new species, even new body plans. So this is the difference between microevolution and macroevolution. All of you should remember this, and then with this background, we have to study this synthetic theory of evolution or neo-Darwinism. See here, this is a cladogram which is showing. See, this is the microevolution, slow changes take place. But whereas in macroevolution, you can see there's a large, considerable changes at a time, abrupt changes. Now, coming back to this neo-Darwinism, it is a modified version of the theory of natural selection. Uh, it's wrong. It's not wrong if I say it's a reconciliation between Darwin and de Vere's theory. Scientists contributed to this are mainly De Vries, T.H. Huxley, R.A. Fisher, and other good lot of genetists uh, have contributed in the initial stages to the neo-Darwinism, though more additives were added in the later course by all scientists of different fields. The neo-Darwinism started with the population genetics. What was happened was uh, there were many statisticians started using the mathematical models to determine how mutation and natural selection can change the gene frequencies in a population. It's a more theoretical. Mathematicians are always theoreticians. So, how mutation and natural selection together can cause change in the genetic frequencies of a population. When this population genetics was coupled with Darwinian selection, that is natural selection, the so-called modern evolutionary synthesis has emerged. Population genetics and the natural selection. When coupled, this synthetic theory of evolution or what is so-called neo-Darwinism came into practice. Before studying and understanding the synthetic process, the synthetic theory of evolution of neo-Darwinism, I think it is very essential first to know the postulates of neo-Darwinism, and then let's try, let's find explanation for that one by one. There are certain postulates in neo-Darwinism or the synthetic theory of evolution. One is the genetic variability. Genetic variability is an opposing force for heredity. Genetic variability, all of you know that. The number of varieties or strains because of the genes. It's an opposing force to the heredity. And all of us know that, even neo-Darwinists also know that this genetic variability is a tool for evolution, or it is a raw material for evolution. It is a raw material for evolution. Evolution can happen provided there is a variability. So that's why it is the raw material for evolution. Now the question is how this genetic variability is brought about. Genetic variability is brought about by either chromosomal aberrations, what you know, the change in the chromosomal morphological changes that takes place in the chromosome without affecting their number. Number is not going to change. If in human being, if there are 23 pairs of chromosome, that 23 pairs are going to remain. But what is there within the chromosome? There may be some morphological changes. These changes may be because of four reasons. One is deletion, loss of a gene block from a chromosome, or duplication, presence of the same genes for more than once, translocation, um, transfer of gene block from one chromosome to another chromosome, or when the chromosome rotates by 180 degree. See here the deletion ABC. Here a small deletion has taken place. That big segment of gene is not there. Or duplication. See here the same chromosome B, same genes has been duplicated here. Or sometimes they have underwent 180-degree inversion, and as a result, instead of A B C D E F, it has become AED CBF, like that. Or translocation, where one block of chromosome is attached to other. Uh, this is ABC, but a piece of other chromosome JKL has joined here, and for this other block has joined this. I am going to discuss about that in detail. So these are some of the factors how variability is brought about. One is the chromosomal aberration. Then the numerical chromosomal changes. Second thing, sometimes the chromosome number may change. Euploidy, aneuploidy, which all of you know. Euploidy, gain or loss of one or more genome. Euploidy, it may be gain or loss of one or more genome. It can be haploidy or polyploidy. Polyploidy means more. Haploidy, either it may be monoploidy, diploidy, or polyploidy. See here, diploidy, there are two X chromosomes. Polyploidy, it may be 3X, 4X, 5X, 6X, like that. This is euploidy, where gain or loss. Aneuploidy, here the gain or loss of one or more chromosome. Here it is the, one or more genome, but here is the entire chromosome. Monosomy, nelisomy, trisomy, tetrasomy. One monosomy, one chromosome is absent. Two chromosomes are absent. Trisomy, there will be one extra chromosome. Tetrasomy, there will be two more extra chromosomes. So like that, there's a change in the chromosomal number. That can also bring variability. The third one is the gene mutation. Invisible changes that happens in the chemical nature of the gene, like point mutation. In that again, gene gross mutations, deletions, addition, subtraction. Uh, this is the change in the nature of the gene itself, not on the chromosome, at the gene level. So this is what we call gene mutation or point mutation. This can also bring uh, variations in the population. Then recombination of genes as a result of crossover. Uh, Due to crossing over, new recombination of genes happens. Um, when there's a crossing over takes place, new combination of genes. Some genes from the paternal side, some genes from the maternal side. They together join and form a new combination. And during the metaphase, and then that can also bring variation. Even hybridization, interbreeding, two different individuals belonging to different groups, it produces hybrids. So it here genes from one species is added to the gene pool of other species. So as a result, the combination of genes in the gene pool changes. This can bring variations or variability. So these are all how the then mutagens. There are some physical and chemical agents which are responsible for this mutation, both point mutation as well as chromosomal mutation. Chemical mutagens such as analogs, methylating agents, acridine dyes, etc. Or sometimes physical mutants like temperature, X-ray, ultraviolet rays, they bring variation. Then even genetic drift. What is genetic drift? Change in the gene frequency of small breeding population. There's a change in the gene frequency of small breeding population when the population size is there where the interbreeding takes place uh, due to founder effect or bottleneck effect, the genetic drift will happen. I will explain founder effect and genetic drift later. Just you can, these are the postulates I am talking. Then immigration. When that introduces many genes to the existing gene pool by crossbreeding between the residents and immigrants. By crossbreeding between the residents and immigrants, because when the immigration takes place, some new genes from that immigrated population joins the resident population, and there will be when there's a crossbreeding uh, between the native and or native individuals or resident individuals and migrants, new genes are introduced to the existing gene pool. Now, these are all the things which bring about what you call the variation. And we have already agreed that variation is the tool for evolution or it is the key for evolution. Now, the question is there may be good lot of variations in any population or in the whole set of population. How these variations become the raw material or tool for evolution. Here lies the importance of natural selection because natural selection is the force or it's also a tool which select the better variation among the variants that is found in the gene pool. But natural selection as proposed by Darwin is not operating always because Darwin has suggested that the survival of the fittest and fitness will be selected by the nature, and that's why he called it a natural selection. But in modern synthetic theory of evolution, natural selection is there But it is not the same natural selection which Darwin has proposed, which operates on survival of the fittest. But we have found that natural selection is operates through differential reproduction or comparative reproductive success. Instead of the survival of the fittest, it operates at the level of differential reproduction and comparative reproduction. Now you may ask what exactly meant by differential reproduction, comparative reproduction or reproductive success. Differential reproduction means you take any population. There are many individuals. Each individual shows its own variation. But when it comes to the reproduction, that is the passing their characters to the future generation, the members which are better adapted to the environment, the members which are better adapted to the environment, they have a better chance to produce high rate of reproduction. As a result, they can produce more offsprings than the members which are less adapted. That means the members which are better adapted to the environment or nature, they have more reproductive success compared to the organisms which are less adapted. This is what you call differential reproduction. Because due to the sexual communication, there's a free flow of genes and genetic materials, including the variability that spreads from individuals to deme. Deme is a small group of small unit of population is known as deme. Due to the sexual communication, we expect free flow of genes and genetic variability from individual to first small set of the population, what you call deme, then to the population, and finally in most of the members of the species. When there is a free flow of genes, the natural selection operates at that level and brings progressive changes in the gene frequency. As a result, what's happened is frequency of more adaptive genes increases and that of the less adaptive genes decreases. See, the members which are better adapted to the environment, they have high rate uh, of reproduction, and due to the free flow of genes and genetic variability from those individuals to population and finally to all the most of the members of the species. Here the natural select operates as a result of that. Because of this operation of natural selection, there's a change in the gene frequency. That means now there will be more number of genes which are adaptive genes. In other words, frequency of adaptive genes increases and that of less adapted gene decreases. This is what you call natural selection. Probably this I can explain with the help of uh, one example, that is the Bistun butyllaria. The process is known as industrial melanism. Before the start of industrial revolution in 16th century, that is in Europe, what was there? The There were grey colored pepper moths. The scientific name is Bistun butyllaria. There were grey colored pepper moths were very plenty of them were there. Whereas the dark colored pepper moths were well or very less. In the parental generation, if you see, uh, it was almost 10% was black colored pepper moths. 90% were the grey colored. After the start of this industrial revolution, it was observed that grey colored pepper moths population decreased, whereas the black colored, dark colored pepper moths population increases. In the first parental generation, it was 10%, and in the third offspring generation, it was black pepper moths were or dark pepper moths were 75%. Why it was so? See, before the start of the industrial revolution, environment was very clean. There was not much air pollution. All trees were having covered by lichens and all those things, which are also grey color. The pepper moths, which occupy the tree trunks, were better camouflaged by the predators because these were also grey color. The color of the pepper moths was also grey, and the color of the tree barks were also grey because of the lichens. In this grey background, black colored or dark colored pepper moths were easily sighted by the predators. As a result, predators used to pick up these dark colored pepper moths because they couldn't camouflage themselves. In a grey background, these can be easily spotted. As a result, the dark colored pepper moths were very less, only 10% of the population, 90% were grey colored. But after the onset of the industrial revolution, lot of changes have taken place in the nature, especially the pollution, air pollution increase, and mainly there were lot of tar, soot, dust, carbon particles. All of them started depositing on the tree trunk. You know, the lichens are more susceptible to pollution. As a result of increased amount of pollutants in the air, slowly lichens degenerated or they died. And the tree trunks were coated with this tar, soot, dust, mostly dark in color. Now what has happened? In the dark background, these grey colored pepper moths were easily sighted by the predators. Now the dark colored have the advantage because background is also dark. They are also dark. So they cannot be easily picked up. Over a period of time, what happened? The predators could easily identify the grey colored pepper moths and they started feeding on them. As a result, in the next generation only, the reproductive success of the dark colored pepper moths was very high because they were more in number. They could pass on this dark coloration to the next offsprings. So all of a sudden in the second generation there was an increase in 25%. This process continued. In the third generation, there were almost 50% dark pepper moths, 50% white pepper moths. But in the third generation, the number of grey colored pepper moth decreased drastically, almost 75% of these peppered moths were dark color. This is how the reproductive success and the process of natural selection. At each step, in the first, before the Industrial Revolution, natural selection selected the great peppered moths. But with the changed environmental condition, nature preferred the dark colored one. So their population increased, they got maximum reproductive success, and the population of dark colored pepper moths increased at the cost of the gray colored pepper moths. Then, like differential reproduction, then we have reproductive isolation, inability of the living organisms to inbreed. Sometimes what happens, there are two or one population. Within that population, the members fail to interbreed, maybe because of some species may maintain distinctiveness of characters among the species, or mating sites may be different. That is the inability of related species to breed. This can also contribute to variation. Then, like this reproductive isolations can be because of mechanical isolation. There are different factors which bring reproductive isolation. One is the mechanical isolation. Due to the differences in the morphology of genitalia or reproductive organs of two individuals, mechanical, in this case, mating between two closely related species is inhibited as their genitalia are not compatible. Because of the incompatible genitalia, they fail to reproduce. This is what we call mechanical isolation. Or sometimes it can be geographical isolation due to physical factors. Two populations, in between there is a vast expanse of sea, very high mountain altitudes, or deserts, where these organisms cannot fail to cross over. Geographically, they are separated now. Though they can mate, though they can interbreed, but it is prevented because of they are found in two different geographical locations. Then sometimes it may be spatial isolation. Individuals are as isolated by long distances, which they never cover. For example, uh, even yeah, the elephants will be a good example in my opinion. You take the example of Karnataka. In Karnataka is known for elephant population. 25% of Indian elephant population is found in Karnataka. Where do you find elephants in Karnataka? Mainly in two locations. One is Mysore and around Banerghatta, Nagarole, or Coorg, all those things up to Shimoga it extends. That's one location where the elephants are seen. Second one is in Dandeli, Uttarakhand, Dandeli and all allied neighboring regions. Both of both the elephants are of the same species. Now, what has happened because of the loss of elephant corridor between this southern part of Karnataka and the Dandeli region. Elephants of Dandeli, they are reproductively isolated by a long distance from the elephants of this Nagarole Badi. This is special isolation. If you allow them, they can interbreed certainly. But the chances are very poor because they are separated by long distances which the elephant never crosses. This may lead to special isolation. Ecological or habitat isolation, like that. The difference in their habitat or temporal isolation due to the difference in the breeding periods in different seasons of the year. Same species, breeding period depends, changes. To give one good example, most of the amphibians in the southern India start breeding in the month of June, whereas if you go to the northern India, their breeding season starts in August, September, because their breeding season coincides with the rains that they get. So this temporal isolation due to the difference in breeding periods in different season of the year, they cannot interbreed. Then ethological or behavioral isolations. Due to difference between the individuals of different species during the courtship. In most of the organism, courtship is a very important thing. What is courtship? To put it in one word, it's a love-making behavior. The act prior, during, and after mating, what we call courtship. In ethology, we will study. So this behavioral difference may be there between the two individuals of different species. So that's why they never come together. Like isolation, we have genetic isolation also. Specific interspecific sterility due to the accumulation of independent genes, gene mutations. Though they can undertake the mating, they cannot produce the offspring or the fertile offspring at least. A good example is the cross between horse and ass, which produces the mu and ini. They can mate, but they produce infertile offspring. That is because of the genetic isolation. Then can be physiological isolations also. Physiological due to functional incompatibility in their mating or production. Fertilization may take place, or the fertilization may not take place even though they mate, or even if the fertilization takes place, gametes may not survive, zygote may not survive. All these things are there. So these are all the things which bring about the variability. Once the variability is established in a population, it becomes the raw material for evolution. We are going to discuss in detail about each of these variability one by one, slightly later. According to the synthetic theory of evolution or neo-Darwinism, there are four major steps in organic evolution. One is the appearance of genetic variability, because now it has become very clear only the genetic variability is going to be inherited, not the somatic variability. If it is only in the genes, then it can inherit. If it is in the only in the morphological changes in the somatic chromosomes or genes, it is not going to inherit. So that's why organic evolution can happen when there's a genetic variability in certain members of the population. Once this genetic variability is established, this variability spreads over population because of the differential reproduction. Thus, all organisms will not have equal chance to reproduce. The one which are better adapted have the better chance of reproduction and passing more number of their genes to the future generation than the one which is less adapted. The spread of genetic variability over the population by differential reproduction. Then it's also true that there may be some sort of isolation mechanism between the elementary species as well as parental species. So that's why there will be, as a result of it, there will be reproductive isolation. Then ultimately, accumulation of the genetic variability by any means. Any means means the means which we have already discussed. Accumulation of genetic variability in a population may lead to speciation. These are the four strong steps or points of neo-Darwinism or organic neo-Darwinism or synthetic theory of evolution. Even in synthetic theory of evolution or neo-Darwinism, natural selection plays the important or dominant role or the central role, because it is ultimately the natural selection which select the best. The role of others is limited to bringing the variability or variation. If once the variability is brought, either by differential reproduction, isolation, mutation, genetic drift, or anything, nature operates on all these and selects the best adapted one. So ultimately, the natural selection, by the process of selecting a better adapted individual in a heterogeneous population over the less privileged or less adapted individuals. This is known as the natural selection. What mechanism natural selection follows? The mechanism is very simple: differential reproduction. Differential reproduction is the mechanism of the natural selection in a heterogeneous population to select the better adapted one. So differential reproduction is the tool or a mechanism, not the tool, it is a mechanism for natural selection. All of you know what is differential reproduction. Individuals which are better adapted to the environment reproduce at higher rate and produce more offspring than the individuals which are less adapted. So that's why more adapted individuals will contribute more to the gene pool, and the less adapted will contribute very less to the gene pool. And this goes on continuing because natural selection is a continuous selection. We have already seen due to the sexual communication, there is a free flow of genes. But because of many factors, the frequency, gene frequency in a gene pool may change. How? Because natural selection causes the progressive change in the gene frequency. Again, I have shown you the, see, this is the gene pool of the pepper moth over a period of time, how the gene pool has changed. That means it is nature selected the best adapted one at the given point of time. So natural selection causes progressive changes in gene frequency. See, this is the gene frequency in the first generation, the gene frequency in the fourth generation. The frequency of more and more adaptive genes increases and that of less adapted gene decreases. In the given scenario, more adapted genes are the genes which are meant for dark color, and the less adapted ones are those which are having the gray colored genes. This is what you call industrial melanism is a very good example which I have already told. Another example is the sickle cell anemia. Generally, the people with sickle cell anemia are common in tropical areas, especially tropical areas of Africa, where the malarial disease is a very common. It has been found that the sickle shaped cells kill the malarial parasite. Sickle shaped cells kill the malarial parasite. Because of this criteria, natural selection has preserved it along with the normal hemoglobin only in the malaria affected area. Sickle cell anemia is again a genetically decided. The shape of the cell will be RBC, which flows in the capillary will be like a shape of a sickle. So that's why it is no sickle cell anemia. Generally, the sickle cell anemia has other disadvantages. But in malaria prone Africa, sickle cell is the best thing because sickle cell will kill the malarial parasites. So that's why it has retained this sickle cell condition along with the normal RBC in the malaria non-affected area. In affected area, it is maintained. In non-affected area, there is no sickle cell anemia. Then coming to the types of selection, natural selection. There are different types of selection. Probably it is not within the time limit now to discuss about the type of selection, which I will continue in the next class only because now there is not much time left. If I time, there are different types of natural one. So, ಹೇಳಿ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತಾ? ಹಲೋ,
Yes, sir.
ಕೇಳ್ತಾ?
Yes, sir.
ಅರ್ಥ ಆಯ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ? Because this is a very interesting theory, more relevant theory, but at the same time there is lot of clutches there. ಏನು ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು? If you
ಹೌದು
have
ಸರ್.
not understood anything, please come up. ಕಾಲೇಜ್ ಇದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಫಿಸಿಕಲ್ ನಿಮ್ ಮುಖ ನೋಡಿದ ಕೂಡ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತೆ ಇದು ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗಿದೆಯಾ ಇಲ್ವಾ ಅಥವಾ ಏನು ಹೇಳಬೇಕು ಏನು ರಿಪೀಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಯಾವುದಾದ್ರೂ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗಿಲ್ವಾ ಈಗ ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು ಹೇಳಿ ಸುನಯನ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗಿದೆಯಾ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತೇಳಿ
ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗಿದೆ
ಸ್ಫೂರ್ತಿ
ಹಾ ಸರ್
ರಶ್ಮಿ
ಹಾ ಸರ್
ದೇವಿಕಾ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಸರಿ ಆಗಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಯಾವಾಗ ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೂ ಇಂಟರಪ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಕೇಳಿ ಇವನ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ನಡಿಬೇಕಾದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮೈಕ್ರೋಫೋನ್ ಆನ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಹೇಳಿ ಪಲ್ಲವಿ
ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗಿದೆ ಸರ್
okay there are lot many things to discuss here and I will continue with this because I may need 3-4 hours for this synthetic theory of evolution. So shall we stop here today?
Yes sir.
Okay, thank you for